everybody. But yeah, let's get right into it. I mean, we're going to be doing what is liberalism, what the ideology is, who believes in liberalism, what the political philosophy and all that is, history, all that. So hopefully it'll be a quick little episode here. But yeah, let's get right into the definition. So it comes from, this is something I found on a Greek and Latin blog. I don't know if it's accurate because I was reading down on it, but I know for sure that liberalism, the root liber, that's where it came from, and that means freedom, right? So it went from lefer to liber in Latin, and now obviously it's just liberal now, but that's where the word comes from. Basically, a liberal is someone who believes in freedom. Yeah, so liber means free, and liberalism is the political philosophy to forward freedom and liberty in governmental offices and whatnot. So I got some note cards here so I don't get hooked up. But yeah, so one of the main points I want to do with this, because I want to bring back the word, and this is something I've been hearing since I've been in politics. We really need to bring back the word liberal to its original meaning, because right now, of course, people say, oh, the liberals, they're not liberal. The left is not liberal in the United States of America, at least. They are a very illiberal institution and faction. And really the most liberal group of people we have nowadays in America are the libertarians. And obviously you can see that same root, it carried over. And, it had to get started in the late 80s, I'm pretty sure, when Ron Paul was getting this all together. To actually, because the conservatives were not conserving the traditional liberal philosophy from our founders, and obviously the Liberal Party, the Democrats, they were going way off on a tangent, not sticking to their roots of actual liberalism. So, and then who was the guy that really made all this up? So his name was John Locke, and he was an English philosopher. So he was born in 1632 in Somerset, England. So he was an English philosopher whose works light the foundation of modern philosophical empiricism and political liberalism, classical liberalism in particular. He was inspired of both the European Enlightenment and the Constitution of the United States. So yeah, this was one of the main guys of the Enlightenment. It's really where our founders got their main points, because Benjamin Franklin in the Constitution, he says, the pursuit of life, liberty, you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When John Locke, his saying was life, liberty, and property. So that's where it came from. And then, so a couple other things here. So yeah, like I said, modern libertarians are the closest thing to actual liberal philosophy in America. And really what's funny is that modern conservatives are more liberal than the Democratic Party. So that's kind of funky. It's just kind of a total inversion because, mostly conservatives are the one pushing the Constitution. I don't know. In our modern political setup with Trump and everything, and he's also very illiberal. But anyways, for the whole Republican Party in general, they usually are more liberal on things than the actual Democratic Party, who was supposed to be the liberals. But anyways, so getting into that, is liberalism opposite of conservatism? And if you've been following along, no, it's not. Because conservatism, it has a definition that is always changing, right? So it's the value in tradition, and that can be different anywhere in the world. So, for example, in Russia, a conservative there would be a Soviet, right? A communist. In China, a conservative would be a nationalist, from the Nationalist Party that had to go to Taiwan. So, and that's why I'm not going to be doing an episode on conservatism, is because it's always changing. I think I'm going to do an episode on socialism because that is an actual defined ideology. But anyway, I just wanted to get that out there. So, and that leads me to why I'm here in Wyoming too, because I felt that I was really being oppressed in California through the lockdowns and everything. And it's funny because Wyoming is the most red state, the most Republican voting state, and this place feels the most free, the most liberal place I've been anywhere in America, and it's amazing, because in California, other than the lockdowns, my my car would be illegal, my guns are illegal. You know, it's incredibly hard to run a business there. They have the income tax, the state income tax, whereas we have no income tax in Wyoming. So really, it's funny to say that Wyoming is more liberal in the classical definition than California. All right. So what's the next point I wanted to get to here? So what are liberal policies? Or actually, no, I wanted to show you guys. So just some examples of some liberal documents. So obviously, the Declaration of Independence, that's a liberal document. The U.S. Constitution, like I was saying, Bill of Rights, obviously, right? Like, because everything in the Bill of Rights, those are all liberal philosophies. You know, right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to worship whatever God you want. You know, right to defend yourself with any weapon that you see fit. You know, due process. All of these things were created long before the Constitution by people like John Locke, and that our founders actually used as their, you know, guidelines to found our country. So we really are a liberal nation fundamentally, and we have to keep that going, you know, because I do not want to see a vast departure from liberal philosophy. So yeah, some liberal policies. One of the first ones was the Magna Carta, you know, and that ushered in a lot of new rights for the citizens in Great Britain back in 1300, I think. I don't know. I should have got a link for the Magna Carta. I think it's here somewhere. No, doesn't look like it. Anyways, but yeah, that was one of the first documents, and it has been building since, and we're kind of in a situation now where liberalism needs to be changed a little bit to keep working, but I'll get into that at the end. Some examples of policies that are not liberal. So if you're for prohibition of anything, you know, alcohol prohibition, cannabis prohibition, just general drug prohibition, that is not a liberal policy, right? And that kind of makes sense because the Democrats in the United States usually are the ones that are pushing stuff like that. But then these other ones, you know, like I was saying, gun bans, that is not a liberal policy. That is completely illiberal. Free speech bans, vaccine mandates, bans in forcing people to do stuff in general, all of these things are not liberal fundamentally. They are really something else, and I would say progressive, and that's a term kind of like conservatism, because conservatism and progressivism are pretty much opposites. You know, one's always valuing tradition, while the other one is valuing progress. Obviously, that's why it's called that. But really, neither of them have to do with liberalism. But yeah, the progressives and the conservatives, they both like to ban things. They both like to push policies that are not liberal, right? And these are our founding documents that we need to stick to. So now I wanted to show you guys. Oh no, I closed one. Hold on. I closed my map. Okay. Because I want to show you. So this is a pretty good representation of liberal countries in the world. So let's see if you guys can see that pretty well. Okay. So yeah, as you can see here, the more green it is, the more liberal it is. The more black or red it is, the more illiberal it is. And they put countries like Europe, or, you know, the continent of Europe is pretty liberal. The continent of North America is pretty liberal. And obviously the East, because this philosophy was founded in Great Britain, France, Germany, you know, these places that were not of the East. So that's why they don't really have a strong dedication to liberal principles over there. You know, obviously China, Russia, they crack down on free speech a lot. And that's another thing I wanted to get into with this map itself, is because it's funny, they list Scandinavian countries, and then Canada and Australia, and even Britain as more liberal than the US, and that is just a complete farce. They arrest people in Britain for free speech law, or for saying things that they don't like, right? If you post something in Britain or in Germany or Australia, you will get arrested if the government does not like that. So really, my argument would be that America really is the most liberal country in the world today and historically, and no one beats us out on that. You know, you can say anything online. I can say whatever the fuck I want right now, right? And nobody's gonna come in. Government's not gonna swoop in in ropes, break the windows out and come arrest me. Whereas that would happen in the UK if I'd said something that the government didn't agree with there, right? Completely different here. So, yeah, I just wanted to map that out for you. Obviously, Middle East is probably some of the most illiberal places. Women there almost don't have any rights. Same with China, Russia. It's a little bit better. But yeah, I just want to show you guys this. I would definitely switch the color of the U.S. to the most liberal. I mean, because there's no other comparison. If we're talking about classical liberal fundamental principles, the U.S. is gold standard. There's nowhere else in the world that you can have these rights upheld by the government. So, and then parties. So the parties, I was talking about the U.S. earlier. So obviously in the U.S., the Libertarian Party is the closest thing to liberal philosophy. In Germany, it's the FDP, the Free Democratic Party. In the UK, they call themselves the Liberal Party. So that's a pretty good name. And it is not the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats are the ones that are in power right now in the UK, Keir Starmer and everything, and he's not a liberal. To say it lightly, he's a authoritarian progressive. So yeah, those are just a couple examples of liberal parties throughout the world. And then let's see here. You know what? Actually, I think I closed a different link. Was it this one? Was it Liberal Documents? No, it was... Oh, the Political Compass. Here it goes. All right. So yeah, here's a political compass. And for you guys that... Oh my God, paused. That had never seen one of these before. So this is, for me, the best way to look at politics. There is no right-left spectrum because you really don't know where people lie on ideology with something like that. With something like this, you have the right, which is more capitalist, the left, which is socialistic, libertarian, which I was just telling you about, freedom, and then authoritarian, which is the antithesis of liberty. So, and you get a couple people on here, and it's not perfect. Like you see Obama here in the authoritarian right section. I would put him a little more left over. Milton Friedman, that's a great example of someone who's a true liberal. Same with Ron Paul, Rand Paul, although I might switch them. Yeah, hold on. I didn't look at this too well because it puts Rand all the way at the right where it says... Oh no, that must be Ayn Rand that they're talking about. That makes sense. Thomas Jefferson, places like this, China, Pakistan, these are all obviously authoritarian leftist places. So yeah, what is the next point here? So let's move on to benefits of liberalism. So the first one I want to talk about here is just wealth in general. So this is a logarithmic graph of wealth growth in the United States of America. And by logarithmic, I mean exponential. Because see, it goes 1,000, 3,000, 10,000, 30,000. So really this on a flat graph would be an exponential, right? But they just use this to make it to explain it a little bit easier. But obviously you can see here, since our foundation, we have the trend line has been going up. Now, this only goes up to 2000 because I think, we might see some drastic changes in 2008 and 2020, which were two of the most illiberal periods in our time. 2008, the Great Recession, having the government come in and bail out all these companies, that's not liberalistic at all. These companies, they should have failed on their own or won on their own, right? So I think if you took this graph out a little bit, you probably see dips in 2008 and 2020, obviously, because you can see here that's the Great Depression right there. The 1930s had a big drop, but we came back up. But as you can see, wealth has been slowly growing over time. Nothing to say with how the situation is right now, but just a base example of wealth has been growing because of liberal principles and capitalism, because capitalism is in its essence is a liberal idea, right? The free market, being able to trade with who you want, being able to own the means of production as a private individual, because in I don't know, socialists would say that I would be able to do this in a not Chinese, but a socialistic country. But I really don't think so. Do you guys really think that if I was saying this kind of stuff in China, like they wouldn't have come through the door already and shut me down? Like, come on. So let's move on to some more benefits here. And this is just a little meme I wanted to show you guys, because I'm sure you guys have seen it before. This is scientific progress over time, and it's not like an actual scientific graph, but it just shows you a good example of how scientific progress was going pretty good until the Dark Ages, before the first millennium went down, and then obviously during the Renaissance, and then the Age of Enlightenment, specifically when John Locke and others came around to really develop this idea. That's when it really sprouted up, and that's when scientific advancement really exploded. Because in my opinion, you can't have the scientific method without being free, right? You have to be able to be free to ask questions in order to study them, right? So scientific progress is reliant on a liberal, what would you say it, community or society, really. But that's not, it's not super scientific. I was trying to find a real graph. And then this is another really cool fact I found while I was researching for this episode, that 90% of all the scientists that have ever lived are alive today. And that's due, like I was saying, to liberalism. If you're not free to ask questions, there's no way to do science. And that's what I am as well. I went to school for microbiology and, really got to put it in the works during COVID. Because, man, it just, all the stuff coming out was just, it was just nuts. Anyways, go watch my third episode. I break down all the science. I just had an argument with a pseudo-scientific page the other day. I don't know if you guys saw that post, but, man. Yeah, so science relies on liberalism to succeed. The next one, I would say, is life expectancy. So, really, liberal principles didn't come in to the world, I'd say, until probably the foundation of America, right? The United States. Because before that, anywhere they tried to be liberal, it wasn't working. That's why, the settlers had to come over from Britain, because they had to get away from the really tyrannical king, right? They had to set up their own colonies, and that's what eventually grew into the United States. So that's why, the idea was formed in the Enlightenment, the 1500s, 1600s, but it really didn't get implemented until the 1700s. And I would say life expectancy, it's not completely correlated to liberalism, because you'd expect to see it start to come up around 75. But with all of the advancements we had due to technology and science, this is what caused people to have greater life expectancies. And you can see here, I believe there are some dips here. So this is in the 60s. Let's see, Asia. Okay. So Asia and then the world. So really the only dip you have here when it actually started coming up is Asia. I don't know if you guys know what happened in Asia during the 50s and 60s, but it was, the communist revolution in China, and which led to, mass starvation of millions of people, probably the biggest die-offs of people the world has ever seen, because, they put farmers in work offices and then, office workers out in the fields, and nothing worked because they thought they could centrally plan all this, but it never works, right? You need the invisible hand of the market that no single person can ever, no single person can ever know what every single person in the world is thinking. So that's why you can never have a centralized economy. It's just going to lead to bad things. So let's see if I got any more benefits here. Oh, now, okay. Let me see. Oh, and then another one that's not in a graph here, or a couple of them. So trade, obviously, which also leads to less militarism, right? Because if you're trading with countries, then you're not going to want to go to war with them. Anyways, let's get to some of the cons of liberalism, because obviously no ideology is perfect, but I think liberalism is really the best thing we've got so far. So you can see distribution of household wealth in the U.S. by income group, because in a liberal, capitalistic society, you're going to have unequal outcomes. Like, it's just going to happen. People are different. People have different beliefs, different work ethics, and you're going to have vastly different outcomes. So you're going to have, you know, things like this where your distribution of your wealth is way stratified. You know, the top 1% owns a lot more of the total wealth now than they used to. You can see, you know, the lower middle class and then the upper middle class. You know, they have gotten bigger over time, but the real wealth disparity has been coming in the top 1%. You know, I'd say over the past, like it says here, probably the past 10 years. Yeah, probably since 14, 15, where it's been getting really bad, just in terms of wealth disparity. You know, and when you have, you know, people living on the streets and homeless and all these problems, they see people with, you know, insane amounts of wealth, and they're like, well, hey, why aren't you helping out here? And that's why a lot of people turn to socialism, stuff like that, to force the rich people to give up their money, or it to be forcibly taken from them. So obviously, this is something they can always get liberalism for, is that will always be unequal outcomes. So yeah, the wealth gap, and then along with this comes a lack of social cohesion. Because really, when you're free, when you're pursuing what you want to do, and you're not part of a collective, mostly, everybody's going to be doing their own thing. You're not going to be, you know, forwarding a goal as a community most of the time. You know, in a fundamentally liberal country like the United States, we're very individualistic here, right? So you have a lack of social cohesion, which can contribute to, you know, things like not being able to progress to things that we really need to get to. So that's obviously a con. And then probably the biggest one of the 21st century that we have seen, the biggest con of liberalism has been mass immigration. Because you have these vast, what's the word? Refugee programs here in the UK and most of Europe. And these are based in liberal philosophies, right? That all people are created equal. Well, that's true, but not all cultures are created equal. And we've been, not just here, but in the UK and Europe, we've been bringing in refugees that do not share our culture, who are not liberals in any way. And it's really destructive to the liberal foundations that founded this country. So I think that's all I got, other than the outro. So I mean, obviously liberalism is dying. You know, libertarianism in America has. I thought we were going to have a renaissance there back, you know, 10 years ago, but then Trump won the Republican Party. I really wanted my boy Rand in. You know, that would have been a great thing if he can ever get into the Republican Party, but, you know, we'll see. I don't know. Man, it's, yeah. But anyways, the last point I want to make is for liberalism to survive, it does need to be changed. And I think the best way to do that is liberalism is only for people who believe in liberal philosophy. Right, you can't have, and that goes against the tenets of one of the core tenets of liberalism, which is all people are created equal, right? Treat everybody equally. But it's like in this modern time, when you have so many people that are coming over from countries that are authoritarian in nature, like you can't let this go on much longer, because everything's going to be torn apart, man. Like the world is so hot right now, it's so inflamed, and I don't know what to do about it, but at least with the ideas of liberalism, I think they should only be applied to people who are liberals, who believe in liberal philosophy, who believe in freedom, who believe in liberty. But anyways, I think that's all I got for you guys. I hope you liked it. It's a little bit of a shorter episode. Hopefully I wasn't too stumbly over my words. But yeah, thank you for watching. Go like, follow, and subscribe on the multiple platforms, you know, YouTube, Rumble, BitChute. Yeah, and hopefully I can get back for another episode here soon. So, thanks guys. Keep it spicy out there.